Did you hide from the trauma of losing your mom at the age of 11 by pretending to be a spy with your imaginary friend who's essentially a more dashing incarnation of your dad? Did you do everything your imaginary friend told you to, darting on foot into traffic in a busy downtown intersection, committing Grand Theft Auto with the corpse of your nerdy adult male friend in the trunk, and shooting a man in cold blood? Did you drag the entirety of San Antonio into this wrong man spy mess, endangering much, if not all of the city, in your quest to single-handedly stop our Cold War enemies from getting secret plans that you didn't even get to see yourself? If so, you might have just found yourself in the Unkind Rewind, where we were thankful we didn't take a dirt nap in the San Antonio River like one of the villains in the 1984 Hitchcock for Kids thriller starring E.T.'s Henry Thomas, Cloak and Dagger.
Thrill me.
I'm gonna name you Kodo. You get a name too, Podo.
I got good news and bad news, girls. The good news is your dates are here.
What's the bad news?
They're dead.
You too? You got a boner too? Blue Steel.
Salutations, hailing 1,250 miles up I-35 from the action in this film, cozily embedded in St. Paul, where I've been diligently avoiding being handed any video games by strangers. I am Josh Dugan. Joining us from the city that doesn't sleep but has often been the setting for Wrong Man thrillers is my co-host, Sean McGrath. Sean, have you been teaching children how best to play games and lending them your massive walkie-talkies?
Yeah. Kids stop by where I work. I basically run a game store from the back room.
Okay, cool.
I never really go out and deal with customers.
Sure.
But I allow children to come back unsupervised and play very, very close to my lap.
As one does.
Yeah. Though, just my regular 9 to 5.
Yep. This week we're joined by our special guest, who was lucky he himself wasn't sucked into his own Cloak and Dagger fracas on one of his multiple contemporaneous family trips to San Antonio, Mike Wiebe. Mike, why don't you tell the audience who screwed the pooch and didn't listen to last week's installment a little bit about yourself?
Hey, I'm Mike. I'm a musician and comedian, and I'm just happy to be alive after all the Cold War scrapes that I went through here. And I grew up just a few hours north of where our hero had his action go down, and I can tell you that there was plenty of Russians running around Denton, Texas when I was growing up.
I bet.
Yeah.
So, last week, I admitted to not having seen Cloak and Dagger since the George W. Bush administration. Sean, what was your relationship to Cloak and Dagger before this week?
Cloak and Dagger was a family rental movie night. And like I said last time, I have a heavy association with Cheese Whiz with this because it was the first time that my mom let us buy the kind of never go bad Cheese Whiz that sits like probably Old Dutch.
Cheese stuff, yeah.
Yeah, the cheese stuff that you throw in a microwave to radiate even further.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was not something we saw in theaters. It was definitely a rental, definitely something where I went, oh, it's the kid from E.T. And that was the last time. So we're going 30 years probably.
Maybe more, yeah.
Possibly more, but around 30, yeah.
And Mike, when do you think the last time you saw the staple of your youth was?
I'm going to guess probably over, I'm trying to remember how old I am. 47, 46.
I have that problem too, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably been 35 years. Like, it's probably been, it came out in 86, and I probably watched it a lot when it came on video. I saw it in the theater. I definitely saw it in the theater. I didn't see it because I was looking up afterwards. Originally, it was a double feature.
Yeah, which was news to me.
With The Last Starfighter. Yeah. And I think I remember that and wanting to see both of those movies because I didn't get to see Last Starfighter in the theater, I don't think. But I definitely remember seeing this. But we watched it a lot on home video.
A strange concept that you just highlighted there, the double feature.
Yeah. I forgot that they used to do those.
I wasn't even aware that they had used to do those.
Yeah.
I only thought that was in reference to drive-ins. Like
Yeah,
you
the
go and
same.
there would be
Yeah.
two.
Yeah.
And it was kind of up to the discretion of whoever was running the drive-in to pick the two movies.
And this isn't really drive-in
Yeah.
fare, you know, like
Yeah.
this is like family-oriented drive-in fares, you know, so much later at night. That's when people are going to bone in a car.
I was going to say I probably looked a lot like Henry Thomas the last time I saw this theater. In the theater. Yeah. I probably definitely was wearing shorts and tall socks.
Were you lugging around an impossibly large walkie-talkie?
Man, my friend in the 4th grade, we lived on opposite sides of like an elementary school, basically, in neighborhoods, and his dad was an Army dude, and his dad had giant walkie-talkies,
Okay.
and we would like, I don't know, what do you call it? Not call each other, but walkie-talk each other.
Yeah, walking each
at
other.
night. Yeah, so I actually did run around with big
That's
old
funny.
walkie-talkies like that.
So getting into the pre-interview, Mike, did you let the doctor who was sending you demos know that you were going to be recording a podcast about Cloak and Dagger so he could prepare?
My therapist is already well aware of my Cloak and Dagger.
Well, no, the
issues.
doctor who was like sending you demos after your accident.
Oh no, I haven't let him know yet. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think he's listening though. I'm sure.
I'm sure.
He'll find out now.
You can't trust adults. That's what
Yeah.
I've learned from Cloak and Dagger.
That's the truth. It's the goddamn truth.
Not even olds.
Not even olds.
So, about to throw to the first clip, we asked you what drew you to Cloak and Dagger as a kid, and you spoke to its having been shot in your home state.
It was a big deal that it was shot in San Antonio.
Yeah.
In Texas. I think it was like, yeah, even though Denton is, like now if something was shot in San Antonio, I don't think that it wouldn't be a thing or whatever. It was just a big deal that a real movie took place in San Antonio. Like as a family, we'd been to the Riverwalk and stuff like that. And we went back, I think, to San Antonio, like to the Riverwalk. And for me, I remember being really excited about like kind of being able to play Cloak and Dagger. Because I guess nothing else was really getting shot down here. I mean, maybe the exterior opening sequence to Dallas, and that's about it.
Was there anything strange for you this time around seeing San Antonio, a place you'd been then and since, circa like late summer of 1983 when they shot this?
I mean, I had a visceral memory of, after watching the movie, there's a scene where somebody pulls out like a knife and stabs it into the side of one of those boats, like they're trying the what do you call them? Riverboats? No, I don't know if they're riverboats, but yeah. And I remember playing that as a kid, like me and my brothers, like pretending to have a mock fight on one of those boats.
Okay.
So, but based on this scene?
Based on this scene, yeah.
okay.
Based on the scene. Like we saw it when we were down there, and I remember being really bummed out that there was no way that I was going to be able to jump off the boats at all.
Just like a sidebar here, that assassin like misses that kid with that blade like point blank.
Yeah,
he
so
can't
bad.
fucking shoot that kid ever.
Yeah.
Henry Thomas is running around pretty close to him, and he's firing at him with the silenced pistol. But he can shoot a mouse in the dark.
Yeah.
Are you fucking kidding me? He sends that mouse to hell 5 feet away from a kid in a red jacket.
Yeah, that red jacket is not staying.
No. I mean, I thought you'd use the red jacket in the tunnel as like a bait and switch.
Yeah.
But I guess the importance of tucking your legs up.
Yeah.
That's what we learned from this. You got to tuck those
that
legs
guy
up.
was a shitty shot. All those spies were I can't remember who took the first shot at him in the stairwell, because somebody was just
It was
point
him,
blank.
wasn't it?
I think it was him.
It was him.
Yeah, that guy sucked.
I mean, if he's coming in from that stairwell where the scientist... I mean, because he kills the scientist, right?
Yeah.
So he had no problem shooting two in the chest of the scientist.
Yeah,
Henry
sure.
Thomas is right next to him because...
Smaller target.
He exchanged, smaller target, but...
He can only shoot adults.
I don't think Henry Thomas had started to move. I think he was standing, and the gunshots. Yeah. Anyway, more on him later.
Yeah, lots more. So you surmised that it wouldn't matter as much to you now if a film had been shot in Texas. But obviously this podcast is at least secondarily interested in nostalgia. Do you ever go back to any of the older, lesser-known films that wouldn't have been on your radar as a child, but which were shot in Texas during your youth, like Fandango or Nadine or Blood Simple or Slacker or Heart When Highways Piranha?
Slacker, for sure.
Sure.
And where was Blood Simple shot?
Austin.
I didn't even... Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, none of that exists anymore. I guarantee you that is all.
No, some of it
high-rises.
is. Some of it's
Really?
Yeah. Because they're out at Mount Bonnell. One of their apartments is one of the ones like on Dirty Sixth. You can tell what it is.
It's been a long time
by the fucking arched windows.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to get.
And they shot at the drugstore too. The old drugstore on Dirty Sixth too.
I haven't seen Blood Simple in a long time. I need to give that a rewatch. But I work right near the strip where half of Slacker was shot. Like, I work right down. I have to drive past all those kids and stuff like that. And I haven't revisited it, but there's a show that actually, there was a Benji, the dog, TV show that was actually shot in North Texas. It was a show about Benji the dog and two kids and two robots that were just these kind of like plastic puppets, and they were having adventures all throughout Denton. And I remember at one point they shut down some stuff in like the town square of Denton to film Benji, and I was bummed because I wasn't allowed to go run on set.
Did Necessary Roughness shoot in Denton too?
Yes, Necessary Roughness did shoot. Yeah. I was in high school when that happened.
Okay.
And I remember driving by, and Sinbad was in like a 5.0, and I was like, oh, Sinbad. And then one time we were skateboarding on campus, and they were shooting a scene with Scott Bakula.
Okay.
And Scott Bakula saw me and my friends doing tricks over on like a little two-stair, and he was like, good work, boys. And we were like, yeah.
You're like, that's Sam Beckett.
And then years later,
Did he jump into you by any chance?
He jumped,
Did
he
leap into you?
Oh boy,
because he wanted to skateboard.
Yeah. But years later, I was working in Austin at a bar, a place called Rio Rita.
One of my favorite bars.
Yeah, a great bar. A guy came up, and it was like the first person of the shift, so there's nobody there, and he was talking to somebody, and I could tell that they were film guys, and he was talking film stuff, and they were just chatting for a little while, and it was the guy that played the samurai. For whatever reason, there was a guy that was a samurai that was in Necessary Roughness, and I was like, I know you. Oh, you were the samurai in Necessary Roughness. He was like, oh my God. And then I got really excited because I remembered him from another thing. Okay. And my mouth talked quicker than my brain could handle. I was like, oh, and you were the guy that got caught sucking some dude's dick in Brighton Beach Memoirs. And he was like, oh, yeah, that was me too.
Fantastic.
Actors love when you bring up.
Oh, Mike's been in movies too.
Yeah, I was in.
Everybody Wants Some.
Everybody wants. Yeah, that was a real movie. Though. Yeah.
They could. Have you been recognized in that role?
It's kind of you're playing yourself almost.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
No, nobody saw that movie. Nobody really. Not many people saw that movie. We went.
Just us.
I remember. I remember thinking like, man, I'm part like because Dazed and Confused was such a huge movie to me when it came out, and young people and like young filmmakers and stuff like that, and this was like the spiritual follow-up to Dazed and Confused, and I thought it was going to be as big as Dazed and Confused was, but it was not. Most people haven't seen it.
That was all of Riverboat Gamblers, right? Playing in the punk bar?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, it was really cool though. They like we met with Linklater beforehand and talked about it, and we wrote the songs. Well, one was a cover song by a band called the Big Boys. It was an old Austin, Texas punk band in like the early 80s, late 70s. And he was like, I want it to be in that era. And then he was like, it was just like off the top of his head. He was like, what would you think about like a cover of some like old TV show like Gilligan's Island? We were like, oh yeah, we could do that. We wrote it up and made it our, very like 81 punk version of that. But I think actually the Big Boy song we used, like we went and like found like, we did like an MDC song and a Dix song. We recorded like 4 or 5 things, and we're like, these are all of that era. And it was just cool that he was just like, yeah, I don't know, find something that works good. And Yeah, it was a really cool set too. Like it was a fun. I'd never been on like a
Big set.
big set. Yeah, like a studio. I'd never been on a studio set for sure. It was cool to see it all work out. I remember sitting next to that guy, Glenn Powell, in makeup.
Who lives in Austin now.
He lives in Austin.
I mean, he is from there at least. Like,
yeah. He had big jock energy too on there, and I was really like, so he's kind of blowing up, and I kind of always think like, why are we letting this jock fucking dick get so big?
Yeah.
Granted, he plays a dick in most of the things he does. Maybe he's a sweet guy, but I remember sitting next to him in the makeup chair and being like, I don't know. He was really not famous then.
You're like, this guy needs makeup?
Yeah.
Especially he's playing a baseball player. Like, he doesn't need that much makeup.
Yeah.
But,
He was real cocky.
Sean was in Twilight, if you weren't aware.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What were you in Twilight?
I had that big frat energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's in the scene, well, you can say it. You can tell it. I don't need to.
For the record, I didn't bring this up.
I did. I brought it up.
No, I'm excited. I want to hear.
We corner Bella kind of in a parking lot and are way too physical with her. And Edward shows up to save her in a car. Scares us away into the night. Bunch of drunken frat boys coming out of a bar.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
They reused the footage, too, so he got paid a second time. They
Oh,
reused
nice.
it in a flashback in the second movie.
Oh, that's the best.
Yeah,
That's
nice.
the best, to get paid for not even having to show up. I always I've shot a lot of stuff, and I do some acting and stuff here and there, and I'm always like, but you get to act in stuff that's filmed. Like, I mean, I don't get to very often, you know? So every time I get something, I'm really excited, but then the day of, when I'm actually there, I'm always reminded, like, oh yeah, this is really fucking tedious.
And, it's so boring.
And I used to be so hungry for it, I would say yes to anything, but now I'm like, is it outside? No, I don't know. I don't know.
Were you in any of the David Gordon Green stuff? Were you in Joe or anything?
No.
Okay.
No, I wish.
Yeah.
That would have been cool to be in.
Yeah. I mean, obviously Johnny was, but...
Yeah.
So about Cloak and Dagger.
Yeah, back to Cloak and
Yeah.
Dagger. When you played Cloak and Dagger on the Riverwalk, did anyone end up in the drink?
No, I wish. That would have been a story.
Even if the bullet hadn't killed him, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
San Antonio River would have.
Oh, for sure. That's some sludge, brown
Gross
sludge.
ass water.
I remember being, not only not getting to jump out of the boat, but having parents there and them having a really, they wouldn't let us walk 2 feet away. And I just remember the disappointment that I didn't get to really experience the Henry Thomas freedom of running around.
Now's probably as good a time as any to talk a little bit about Henry Thomas, whose career prospects couldn't have been brighter at this point in time. So after Quiet 1983, San Antonio's own Henry Thomas was in 2 films in 1984. The Jerry Schatzberg family drama Flop, set and shot in Tunisia, starring Gene Hackman, Thomas, and Rip Torn. That was Misunderstood. And then this, Cloak and Dagger, a project which originally began as an adaptation of 1949's The Window, which itself was adapted from a Cornell Woolrich short story, The Boy Cried Murder, which is why he's a credited screenwriter on this. This became what it was specifically to play to Henry Thomas's strengths. According to IMDb trivia, and this could be apocryphal, this was shot in Henry Thomas's hometown to accommodate him, given that he remained in San Antonio and did limited work as an adolescent and teen after growing uncomfortable with his unfathomable popularity following E.T.
Yeah.
This at least kind of passes the smell test.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You said you had friends who knew him.
Yeah, I have a coworker that, as an adult, knew him as in the aughts.
Okay.
So he wasn't really
When he was
acting
playing
anymore.
in bands and stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Now, we asked you what you remember the plot of Cloak and Dagger being, and you said...
Henry Thomas gets a video game with a secret code in it, some sort of secret code of plans, and he runs afoul of some bad guys, some spies that are trying to catch him, and he's aided by his dad. So his dad's I believe his mom is dead, His dad is a real guy, but he has an imaginary character that his dad also plays.
Okay.
Named Jack Flack. And it has to do with a role-playing game. Jack Flack, I think, comes into a role-playing game. So he's often conversing with his imaginary friend, who's his dad. And I definitely remember there being that 80s edge of kind of I think people call it kinder trauma, where they don't really make it. They don't really do it as much anymore. Where, like, I remember feeling like, as a kid, he was really in danger. And I remember he kills a guy and is really bummed out about it. And I definitely remember, like, because we watched this a lot on VHS afterwards, too. And I remember being like, man, I would have been fine with killing that guy. That was a bad guy, like, definitely not. And my parents being like, no, that would, not in those words, but going, no, that would fuck you up if you killed a bad guy. No, not me. I'm too tough. I'm from Denton, Texas, Mom. Yeah. Going back on that, like, I think I remember getting lectured about how it was not okay to kill people. And being like, well, what if I'm in that situation? What if I'm in that situation? He's
literally pointing a submachine gun.
Yeah.
At Henry Thomas.
Yeah.
He's pointing it. And, like...
He's telling him about how he's going to kill him.
In a really, really bad way. Which makes me think, like, why not just do it also, right? Like, it's not like you see bad guys who have to, like, say what they're going to do to the kid if he doesn't give them the gun. Like, because they're without a gun. Mm-hmm. But he has... Like, what more could he get from Henry Thomas at that point, right? It's not like he needed more information. So why is this bad guy kind of posturing about what he's going to do, how he's going to, like, dismember this fucking 10-year-old or whatever? But, well, like, why is he hesitating? I get that it's a movie, but also, like, you're just giving this kid who has a gun on you more incentive to fucking shoot you. It was a weird scene.
He really monologues a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he does his James Bondian villain monologue there.
And Henry smokes him.
But does he have a superhero? Or does Davey have a superpower here? Because the guy sees Jack Flack, right? We're meant to believe this.
He's looking. I mean, Henry Thomas is doing that thing where he's looking to the right, right?
When we get a different angle, it is right next to him.
Yeah.
He can't wrap his head around the fact that this scared kid, is like, darting his glances to the right. But I also feel like maybe that's the justification that we're using for Henry Thomas to pull the trigger, is like, this guy is going to torture a 10-year-old.
Well, yeah, he's like, I'm going to shoot your kneecaps first. Doesn't he say that?
Yeah, and then I'm going to shoot you in the stomach and let you bleed out, and really kind of morbid stuff for a kid movie.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's uplifting, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Now, did you remember at all that he got the video game from a guy who he saw shot and killed in the stairwell?
I didn't. I remember that he got it from the nerd that worked there, but I definitely didn't know that the nerd was Bill Forsyth in a very... I mean, that guy never plays nerds. Like,
but he always... that was such a weird...
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're talking to scientists.
Yeah, we're talking... Because, he gets a game in the stairwell first, yeah. But obviously Bill Forsyth is the one who unlocks the...
Yeah.
I'm not crazy. Henry Thomas never sees the plans, right?
No. Only
it's just Bill Forsyth, yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I guess it was.
So, like, Henry Thomas doesn't even know what he's like, or Davey doesn't know what he's even going after.
Is a vector graphics of
invisible bombers.
Yeah.
So you recalled the father/imaginary friend Jack Flack and the dead mother elements pretty well. Yeah. Was there anything about that kind of like area of the film that was a surprise to you?
Not really. It was pretty much as I remembered it, with splitting time between boring dad and then cool Jack Flack or whatever. And the role playing thing, I definitely remember the giant, when it on screen, I'd forgotten about it, but those giant dice, and remember thinking like, man, that's a fun game. I wish I'd like to play that. But that was like, right around the time of like, I grew up in North Texas with fairly conservative religious parents, so Dungeons and Dragons was like, that was Satan's way into.
Oh yeah, we all saw Mazes and Monsters.
Yeah.
It's gonna make you commit suicide.
Yeah, it's gonna make you commit suicide.
Okay, so could you wrap your head around as a kid what that game was. I had never seen that game in the arcade, and I guess according to the information on this, it was never released actually on the 5200. It only existed as an Atari arcade machine.
Yeah.
So even the game itself, the prop itself, had to be...
Well, you know why that happened, right?
Yeah, I mean, Atari crashed and burned.
Yeah, the 5200 was such a fucking disaster that it was basically like discontinued after 15 months.
Yeah, but I'd never seen this Cloak and Dagger arcade game. I'd never heard of it. I didn't even get that there was a correlation between the two things when I saw this movie. And this game looks like so frenetic, and it almost like a combination of like, I don't know, Tron and I don't know, like it's a really confusing game. What's going on in that screen?
It looks
like,
very confusing.
There's the elevator levels, which are kind of cool because they have this animation to it, and we see that there's a guy in a trench coat. There's the spy. There's the flak, whatever. But what's going on screen is fucking batshit.
Yeah.
And like, if I was Dabney Coleman and my kid's playing this game, like, I would have turned it off way before he did.
Yeah.
I also love the little like parent convention of like turning off the TV when they think they're turning off the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As soon as you turn your fucking back and close my door, Dad, that TV's
going back on.
Yeah.
You didn't do shit. I might not even lost a guy.
Totally. Yeah, I never played that game. I remember looking for it. Like sometimes there'd magically be a new arcade machine in the local Denton Triangle Mall arcade, and I was always looking for it and hoping that it would pop up, but I never saw it.
I'm assuming that as a kid who played video games, that there was probably somebody I went to school with who claimed that he had a copy and claimed that he played it at his cousin's house or something.
Yeah.
Like, you could lie so fucking easily about that.
Yeah. Growing up in Denton, everybody was somehow related to the Von Erichs. Every kid was a cousin of the Von Erichs, and I don't know if they shot. I think they probably did shoot some of that Von Erichs movie, that Golden Claw, whatever it was. Iron Claw. But yeah, so that was, every kid was lying about that, because those guys really did grow up in that area too.
Peter, by the way, thought he might have had a 5200.
Oh wow! I never met anyone with one.
Having a 5200, is a white whale, but having Cloak and Dagger is something only lying kids have.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, how did you feel about the danger Davy was in this time around?
It all came back. Like, I will say, watching this whole movie, like, it's kind of hard for me to be too critical of it, because I could not take my nostalgia glasses off while watching it. There was a lot of like weird feelings that it evoked in me.
Sure.
But yeah, again, like, it's a adult male talk. I mean, name me another show where they're talking about torturing a kid like that so freely.
The Goonies, actually.
Do they
with
talk
Chunk?
about torture?
With Chunk, they're going to put his hand in the fucking.
Oh,
blender.
that's right. Yeah, I remember being.
Yeah.
First we had the fleshy tomato,
Yeah.
then the plump little hand.
He wants to play the violin.
But I mean, it's rare and not nearly as like it. This feels.
That was an 80s thing. I mean, I'm not saying like now. There's not like.
Oh,
I don't
sure.
think
No.
that there's anything close to that.
It would be.
And
hard
even then,
on-
like, this feels pretty extreme for this.
Yeah.
Like, people die in this.
Yeah.
So death is like on the table.
Yeah, is the big chubby mustache man. And that's the other thing too, is like the day after all this goes down, when when Davy's processing not only the murder that he committed of the one guy, but also like he pretty much caused the murder of the other guy. Magically, but still, he did it. It's on him. So there's two bodies that this.
And he got to hang out in the trunk with dead Bill Forsythe.
Yeah, with dead Bill
Forsythe. There's a lot of bodies here, right? Because he's blown up two olds.
He saw the fucking scientist in the stairway die.
Yeah.
Yeah. He saw Bill Forsythe is dead because of what he brought him. Bill Forsythe lives a long, probably loveless life.
Yeah.
But does not get shot through the fucking head at his computer. Henry Thomas brings a bomb onto the plane where 2 olds are killed.
Yeah.
And then each of those hitmen die because of his involvement. Like, wait, one goes through a...
So Rice, both hitmen, the 2 olds, the scientist, Bill Forsyth.
The scientist is the only one that's not his fault.
Yeah.
Like, that he's not complicit in, or not
He
complicit,
doesn't have
but not
direct
involved
involvement
in.
in.
Yeah.
Because if he is killed along with the scientist in that stairwell, none of those other people die. It ends with him.
So you're saying he should have stayed and taken a bullet?
I'm saying that Henry Thomas has become death.
Yeah.
Destroyer of worlds.
Yeah. So that's a lot to digest. The next day
That's a lot on your shoulders. I don't know, and your mom too. We don't know how she died.
It was probably wrapped into this.
She either didn't love you enough to keep going, or you didn't return her maternal love enough. Something very, very clearly related to you is the reason your mother's dead. And I don't know if your father walking away from a burning plane is going to be enough to save this kid.
Yeah, there's going to need that ketamine therapy.
I mean, you really felt like in that scene, like Flack had betrayed him. You know, Flack endangers this kid's life so often.
But this kid's also listening to a fucking imaginary friend. Like, I'm sorry.
But
that's
like,
himself. That's his subconscious, though,
but
telling
you're blaming
him to do this
the
stuff.
victim, right? Like, you're going to say...
No, I'm blaming the person who's making himself do it, his subconscious.
He's a schizophrenic. He's a schizophrenic.
It's because it's not just that he's imagining these conversations. He engages. I mean, we see it through the eyes of
Rice at the end. Yeah.
He's actually arguing and talking with Jack Flack.
So, how did Henry Thomas killing a bad man in a heavily trafficked tourist destination play to adult Mike?
I mean, I was just betwixt with the anarchy of it all. I was like, I love seeing something that is so wrong in today's that would never happen now. It was pretty gleeful.
Especially, I mean, it's the fucking Riverwalk. Like,
yeah, right on the Riverwalk.
It's one of the biggest like tourist destinations in Texas, isn't it? This like second or third after fucking the Alamo,
I'm sure it is,
and that fucking the outlet mall in New Braunfels or whatever.
Yeah.
Would that Riverwalk? I'm assuming that's where he was there at the end, right? Is that?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about dead ends that kind of function the way that one did.
Yeah, I don't think there are.
That seemed really contrived.
Yeah.
But is there ever a time of night where
there wouldn't be anyone there? No.
Vacant? No. And it's not even...
I mean, after bar time, but this is still like...
But he still has to go to the airport. It's like, there's a midnight
and we know that he doesn't get to the airport. It's still before midnight.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like when they show New York City, like modern New York City, and there's like a flickering street lamp and nobody on the streets.
Yeah.
And muggers are kind of allowed to come out of the shadows like ninjas. I'm like, there's a fucking CVS on every corner.
Uh-huh.
Everything is super bright. There's 1,000 people on the street at 4:19 a.m.
Yeah.
And yet Henry Thomas is allowed to
murder.
Do the what was his the pincher maneuver, the crossfire
the crossfire gambit or something like that. Yeah.
Gambit.
Remember that?
I mean, I get that like the submachine gun guy could like eventually shoot the guy in front of him, but like he runs straight at the guy who has a silenced handgun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that guy, again, is just allergic to shooting children. He can do everything else, but he cannot hit a kid.
It's preposterous.
Yeah.
Not hit the side of a barn with that gun.
Not hit the side of a Thomas.
So after talking wistfully of a summer spent watching Cloak and Dagger, Clash of the Titans, and Star Wars virtually every day, you noted that it took forever, or it felt like it took forever, for E.T. to make its way to home video and cable.
Yeah.
It did take forever. You're not remembering things erroneously. They milked another $60 million out of a theatrical re-release in 1985, and then held out another 3 years for an eventual October 27th, 1988 home video release. Now, they priced... Back then, videos were like $90.
Yeah, yeah.
They priced E.T. at $24.95 with the intention of like having people actually buy it. They sold over 15 million units, making $250 million in video sales revenue.
Jesus Christ.
That was a record until the next year for when Batman broke it.
Yeah.
Say that number again, Josh.
$250 million. The home video release for E.T. in 1988 outpaced the top grossing film at the box office in 1988. Fucking Who Framed Roger Rabbit by more than $90 million.
Wow.
Wow.
It definitely goes to show like why parents might want to shut down a kid's career when things are like that fucking crazy, you know?
Yeah.
And then being from Texas originally, you know, like if it was an LA kid, I think they would have just gone.
Yeah.
So
just
that in
shoved it
today's
into
money
that.
is $663 million in
Damn.
video sales.
Batshit.
And Josh, you mentioned earlier that Henry Thomas had a relatively quiet year in 1983. I'm sure that E.T. pandemonium kept him pretty fucking insane through 1983.
Well, it was just release-wise. Like, it was still just like all E.T. buzz, E.T. buzz, E.T. buzz. I mean, he shot both of these in 83, but
he is not living a normal life for, 5-6 years?
No, but I mean, he does Frog Dreaming in 85, and then, which I think is also called Conquest, if I'm not mistaken.
Is that the one where he's out in
That's the one in
Outback
Australia, yeah.
Yeah.
And then he really was only in 2 more movies in the 80s, Murder One and Valmont, which, I mean, they both sound vaguely familiar, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Fire in the Sky was like his next kind of bigger movie in 93.
Yeah.
And Legends is the fall the year after.
Yeah, then he starts popping up and stuff like once every couple of years. But
Yeah. Now, you talked about your dad being the tape master and being responsible for if you could watch a rated R film that he deemed okay for you to watch. Was he a movie guy generally?
No, not really.
Okay.
I mean, he was more of a collector guy and an organizer guy, so there was something he really liked about. He would tape all these movies, and it was mostly for us, for kids, and then he also had like a binder. All the tapes were numbered, but there was like 3 movies on a tape. All the tapes were numbered, and he had like a binder that you could cross-reference which movie was on which tape, and you could look it up alphabetically, or you could look it up by number. And I think he enjoyed that probably more than watching movies.
And was this a handwritten list, or was this
No, it was typed up. He typed it all up.
So dot matrix printer and all that?
Yeah, total Texas Instruments.
Sure.
Is there any
matrix
possibility
printer.
these master lists still exist?
I wonder.
Wow, that would be such a great item.
I don't know what happened.
The
to all
Unkind
those
Rewind
VHS
wants to
tapes.
take a look at that.
For sure.
If it's
we could
still
do
out
a
there.
whole just bonus episode, like thinking about how funny it is that these movies are on the same tape together.
Yeah,
and also when you put the time in, like your dad did, to do something like that, like you can't really envision that there's like a better way to do it, like in the future.
Yeah.
I bought the NBA encyclopedia. It was like more than $100 because I was like, well, how else are you going to see statistics for retired players?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? Like, you have to get this. It's like an encyclopedia. And $100 in like 1995, it was the equivalent of $450,000 today.
Yeah.
That's how much money I spent on that fucking book. Where is it? A fucking Goodwill, probably.
Oh no, you got to get that book back.
Nobody Yeah.
I'm sure I can find it for Sean for about $5.
I do not want it if it was in a free library on the side of the road. I don't have the room in my apartment for that book. But yeah, we would love to take a look at the Master
for sure.
list.
I'll have to ask if that list exists anywhere.
He has binders full of movies.
Yeah.
Binders.
So I asked you what you thought it was about Cloak and Dagger that appealed to your younger self.
I think that it was a kids having adventure. Definitely a kid adventure was a big part of it. I remember liking that, like, him and his little friends were able to, like, they were able to go around. Like, they were, like, getting on buses and going around. I thought that was so cool that they seemed to have their freedom around town. And I remember thinking it was so cool that it was just a movie that was talking about or acknowledging video games.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being really bummed that wasn't a game. I think you could get that game, I guess, but I remember it wasn't on like an Atari 2600. They're playing a different type of Atari, like a more expensive version that none of my friends had. And I never played that game, but I always.
Yeah, it was made for the 5200.
I never met any kids that had the 5200. Did y'all have friends with one of those?
I never had an Atari.
Okay, yeah, I'm old.
Well, I mean, I was born in the 70s also.
Yeah.
I just didn't have an Atari. So obviously we kind of touched on the video game stuff, but how did their unbridled freedom in the city play to you now?
Glorious. I still miss that. I want that freedom. My wife won't give me that freedom.
And she's little too, right?
She's
like
tiny.
She reads like about 5 or 6 in this. She
Yep.
is not a precocious kid. She's a whiny,
Mhm.
like murder me kind of girl
Yep.
that should be on a milk carton by the end of this movie.
Maybe she'll die.
I kept forgetting that they're not related. Like they had that
I
kind
know,
of
yeah.
bratty brother sister.
Yeah.
But like if they're friends, she fucking hates this kid.
Oh,
Like-
you know what's funny is I remember I was talking about my friend with the walkie-talkies. Occasionally we would go and we would ride our bikes to a little ways. I lived kind of on the edge of town, and we would ride towards this area, and you could get truckers on CBs. Getting there, you could hear truckers talking, and you could talk to them. And I remember my friend going, "Davey, this is embarrassing," and I thought it was the funniest thing in the world. His impression of what's her name?
Yeah, of
Is it
Kim.
Kim?
Yeah,
Kim, yeah.
Yeah, from her attitude, she should not be hanging out with Henry Thomas.
No.
Everything was a chore for her.
Yeah, she hated
But
it.
every other boy she hates even more than him.
Yeah,
she
that's
was
right.
never fucking happy.
Yeah.
And again, completely had her life endangered by Henry Thomas's actions.
It does remind of the time, though, where your friends were whoever lives in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that's it, whether you really like them or not, that's who you got to play with.
How did Davy's friendships play to adult Mike? Because he basically has two friends here. It's her and
Bill
it's
Forsythe.
Morris. Yeah, Bill
Yeah.
Forsythe.
And he never left that room, right? Except to like die in a fucking car.
Yeah, he was just in that room the whole time.
His body was dragged to the car. He didn't die
Yeah.
in it.
Okay. So we've only seen him alive in that back room.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think so.
I don't even know if he stands.
I don't think so. There's a lot more in
Don't we
Adult
see him in the
Mike.
front of the store too, or do we not?
I don't think we
One time?
Adult Mike sees a lot of red flags in a guy that old hanging out with kids that young in the back of a store.
Yeah.
There's a lot of red flags. I didn't see that when I was a kid. Obviously didn't notice that at all. Because there was the idea that there was one of my friends had an older brother who I kind of looked at as like an older brother, figure for myself. But yeah, he wasn't that old, and he wasn't a nerd. But there's an age where you're really young, and you just think anybody old that's not your parents, that's kind of cool. Like I couldn't imagine an adult liking a video game when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I remember wishing I had a sort of back room.
Yeah, they really had to nerd him up, right? They
Yeah.
really gave him the patina of nerd, like those fucking glasses.
Yeah.
I don't even remember if I've seen Bill Forsythe in glasses, and those things were thick boys.
Yeah.
It's weird to see them the lenses be that thick, but
Mm-hmm.
they're obviously like not a prescription of any sort.
Well, did he own that store, do you think? That computer
I don't
gaming
think-
store?
I mean, it
I
was a
don't know.
mall, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
That's in the Glendale Galleria, actually. It's one of the only scenes that they didn't shoot in San Antonio.
Oh, really?
But the back room doesn't feel like it's part of the main part of the store.
Yeah.
I wonder if Bill Forsythe had to get on a plane and go be a dead body in a trunk. Like, can you get down to San Antonio, please?
Well, no. I think all the Bill Forsythe scenes were they shot the going into the gaming store, but I think the back room is in San Antonio.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, as long as he didn't have to take a flight just to kind of stare absentmindedly up at Henry Thomas. Literally absentmindedly.
Oh,
There's
yeah,
a
yeah.
bullet
There's his
pegged past
his
the
head
guy.
is absent of brain.
Yeah, it's
Man,
not
his
anymore.
his look just screams somebody that should not be allowed around children.
Oh yeah. It's crazy. Like, what level of freedom did you enjoy in Denton when you were a kid?
At that age, there was like a 2-block area that I was
Okay.
allowed to go, and then occasionally I was able to walk to my friend's house that lived on the other side of my walkie-talkie friend. But even that was kind of like, there had to be like coordinated plans with his parents or whatever that I was headed over that way. I wasn't allowed to walk that far on my own.
You weren't taking the bus downtown.
Wasn't taking the bus downtown. But I think like around the time I was like 13 or 14, maybe even 12, there was a trolley that would go downtown, and I was skateboarding around. Once I got into skateboarding, it was a mix of like getting a little bit more freedom and also lying and,
Granting yourself that freedom.
Yeah, granting myself that freedom, yeah.
So the game did eventually make it to the home video game market. Anyone want to guess what year that was?
I mean, maybe. I mean, I'm sure you can play it now if you dig
You
deep.
can. 2022.
Oh, Jesus.
Whoa.
Atari 20 came out. It was a video game compilation, and the fucking Cloak and Dagger game was on that.
Wow. I feel like a friend of mine recently had some modded out system. I don't even know what it was, but that has like literally like 500 games on it. And I feel like maybe Cloak and Dagger was on that system and I was just going through, but
the real Atari Cloak and Dagger game should have just been Frogger, but instead of a frog, it's Henry Thomas trying to get across traffic.
Yeah, trying to get across boats. You gotta line up the right boats to jump.
Trying to avoid being stabbed in a boat.
Yeah.
Like, when he runs across traffic in downtown San Antonio, I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
I was wondering how they shot that.
Yeah, he really looked like... There was another scene, too, where it was like, holy shit. Granted you have stunt drivers, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, it looked very dangerous. If I was a parent of Henry Thomas, and also, like, that's my cash cow for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm like, let's get the stunt double in here, please. I love how, like, bad guys also, like, on that boat scene, just have a random switchblade, like, stuck up their sleeve. That thing did not look secured. It was just, like, a slight jostling of your wrist, and down comes a switchblade, which is very, like, elementary school boys, trying to, like, finagle that thing down a sleeve to maybe pop out in your palm.
I remember going to the Alamo and kind of scoping out where the bag drop would have occurred.
So they let him shoot exteriors at the Alamo, but they wouldn't let him shoot interiors. So that was on a soundstage in L.A., at Universal, presumably. They shot the opening scene with Dabney Coleman, like, parachuting in. That's on the back lot at Universal. And then they shot another scene on New York Street on the back lot at Universal. But those were the only things that were, like, not San Antonio. It was the interior of the Alamo, the exterior of the gaming store in the Glendale Galleria, and then 2 scenes that were shot in a backlot at Universal. So.
I mean, I don't even know if their intention was, like, this thought out, but it was funny to kind of see that opening scene and see Henry Thomas's imagination play out. Mm-hmm. I kind of wish they would have done more of that, because we get to see, like, bad Russians, like, intermingling with fucking Nazis.
Yeah.
Like, that guy who gets out of the car is definitely, like, a high-ranking German Nazi, right? With the briefcase handcuffed. Yeah. What's he doing in Russia? Like,
who knows?
Only a kid's imagination, right?
Yeah.
They're all bad guys, right?
And then there's a Saudi sheik, right? Like, definitely gotta have somebody from the Middle East tossed in there. Very obvious dummy, too, on that retractable parachute scene.
Yeah.
But again, it's a kid's imagination. I just kind of wish we had that sprinkled out a little bit more, but...
I remember I wasn't allowed to play Dungeons & Dragons, and I identified that game was like Dungeons & Dragons, but then I was very confused. I'd never played it, so I was very confused as if in when you're actually playing Dungeons & Dragons, are you throwing dice to try and knock figures over? Because at the time, it really confused me that it wasn't just like the mingling of his imagination and reality for that thing. Like,
yeah, I don't know if you're going to be invited to too many D&D parties if you're throwing the dice trying to knock over.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's also an issue because you were the target audience for this.
Oh, yeah.
And if it's confusing to you, then it's confusing to every fucking kid out there watching this.
Totally.
Obviously we're all in our fucking 40s and know that that's not how the game would be played, but a kid would absolutely think maybe that is how the game is played.
Yeah.
I mean, they keep calling the video game a tape because it's all grown-ups who don't know what video games are called.
Yeah.
Don't know that they're called cartridges at that point. So I asked what memory stuck out to you most about Cloak and Dagger, and you said...
I remember it being a little bit of a bummer. There's pieces of it that are a little bit of a bummer. I remember, and maybe some of it is him freaking out and crying after he kills the guy.
Mm-hmm.
And
first one's the hardest. I mean, to be fair.
Yeah. Then he gets a taste for it. But I remember reacting to the fact that he is growing up without a mom, and there's a bunch of scenes that address that. I think that they have a talk about it, and the ending where he's kind of.
Well, don't give me too much.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, there's just some bummer stuff around it, some real life. There's a little bit too much real life for it that made this separate from the Goonies or something. The Goonies, I remember just being this is the exact kind of adventure that I want to have, and there's no real stakes in it. But this having life consequences, I didn't really appreciate that as much.
So taste can change. And what you might want out of a movie as a 10-year-old could be totally different from what you want out of one in your 40s. Did the Cloak and Dagger, sadder elements and real-life consequences still play in a way that turned you off of the film some?
No, I think I liked it now. I would have liked more of that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I would like to see it get way darker at the end. I would like to see those therapy sessions.
Yeah. You want a full a 10-minute coda of just him unpacking with his therapist. Yeah.
Him doing EMDR. That's just eye therapy for PTSD soldiers and stuff like that.
I really did kind of sympathize with young Henry Thomas though after he killed that guy, because it was he'll walk through fire for Jack Flack, but after he murders someone, I mean, granted, he tries to justify it, it was him or you or something. But you can really see Henry Thomas flex those emotional muscles there in that scene.
He was a great actor.
Feeling betrayed. Yeah, I think Spielberg is pretty good with kids. He has a great knack for casting kids. He casted fucking Henry Thomas. So the kids in E.T.
Young Christian Bale too.
Young Christian Bale. We really see the difference in this movie though, between when Henry Thomas is in the hands of Spielberg and Henry Thomas is in the hand of this Australian.
Richard Franklin,
the director of this. I mean, he really, especially in the first half an hour, 45 minutes of this thing, it's a struggle. It is not a recognizable Henry Thomas. He feels very wooden. Oftentimes his scene partner is a bratty girl or an imaginary character or just other adults, but I don't know, Josh, did you feel there was a step down here in his performance?
From E.T.?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't love E.T. I don't really have a, soft spot in my heart for it. It's fine. He's good in it. He's a good kid actor. I don't know that it's him. I think it's the material that is not really probably resonating with him until later in the film when the stakes are more discernible to a kid who's just acting in a movie. True.
I mean, I also think the material is not amazing in Goonies, but I think Dick Donner does such a good job with those kids. Mm-hmm. And, Sean Astin's a good actor as a 12-year-old or wherever he was in that. But yeah, I mean, and looking over this director's body of work, he does not have a lot of kid experience. And I think it shows. I think that girl was pretty much ADR the entire movie. Every time that she delivered a line, it felt like that was something that was done in the studio because she was unintelligible on the day.
And they were just we have to keep moving. We only have her for 3 hours.
Yeah, we got 3 hours. She might have an identical twin that we can bring in here and get a couple more takes out of. But yeah, she was a bit of a drag, to be honest, on this movie. Henry Thomas did not have a worthy friend to kind of...
A scene partner?
to play with.
With the exception of when he's with Dabney Coleman.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the exception of that. But did you look her up?
She was like a secondary character in Small Wonder.
Okay, great. That says a lot.
But she was recurring. Like, she was in like 60 episodes or something.
Wow.
Yeah,
She's not the robot girl or whatever.
Yeah. She's not Vicky.
But she can absolutely come in there like a Stephanie from Full House and say some sitcom-y
Inane
quip
Yeah.
and leave the room. Absolutely. But the tone of this movie is just a little different. She's being interrogated. I actually thought it was kind of an okay scene at the police station or the airport with the worst fucking cop. I mean, there was a lot of times where like police are just absent or terrible in this movie.
Maybe this is just ahead of its time.
Yeah, that's showing the flaws in the thin blue line. Did you think that Dabney Coleman and that little girl's mom were gonna fuck later on?
I think they did after.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, it really
for sure. Yeah.
It really led us to thinking like that was going to happen.
That's what I want to see. That's what I want to see.
You want that in the coda too?
Full penetration,
Okay,
everything.
The movie I want to see is Henry Thomas hanging out on Skid Row with Louis Anderson.
Yeah.
I was like, oh shit, is that? Yeah, that is. That's
That
Louis
was
Anderson.
crazy. And you know what's funny? I met Louis Anderson in San Antonio. I'm connecting those dots right now.
That's
On
hilarious.
Skid Row?
Not on Skid Row, no. And there wasn't any
Prostitutes
around.
Yeah, that was and like a very noticeable saxophone on the
Mhm.
score, just to further double down that we were in a seedy environment.
Did you catch who his eventual taxi driver was?
I should know. He was familiar.
It's Nicholas Guest. Christopher Guest's brother.
Oh.
Whoa.
Yeah.
He was the shitty yuppie in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation that lived next to the
Oh, yeah.
Griswolds.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's done a bunch of other stuff. Yeah, I did not clock him at all. I just was like, oh,
I was like, he looks so fucking familiar.
The guy who played Rice was somebody who I've seen a million times but can't remember anything that I've seen him in. But I'm positive I've seen him.
Yeah,
Michael
that's
Murphy.
Michael Murphy.
Michael
yeah.
Murphy.
he's been around forever.
He's in Manhattan. He's the like questionable like best friend kind of Woody Allen's character.
They couldn't get Tony Robbins, so they got Michael Murphy. Yeah, he's done a lot. He's a
He has 114 credits. He was, if you ever watched Tanner 88, the Robert Altman Gary Trudeau show, he was Tanner, the like presidential candidate or whatever the fuck it was. Yeah.
Hey Josh, he's in a movie called
Yeah.
Phase 4. Have you heard of that?
Yes. I love Phase 4. I wrote a song
doing that.
about Phase 4.
We're doing Phase 4.
Oh, wow.
We did the pre-interview last night.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
I just saw Phase 4 for the first time like 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay.
And during the pandemic, and I fucking love that movie. I think it's great. That's that is him. That is him.
It's very weird that he has that as a credit.
Because there aren't many people in it.
No.
Right? Well, I mean, neither of we haven't watched it yet. We just did the pre-interview last night.
There's a lot of ants in it.
Oh yeah.
Are they recognizable ants?
Very, yeah.
Do they reuse the ants in that MacGyver episode? Trumbo's Army?
Some of those guys. There's A Bug's Life. People from A Bug's Life are in it.
Right on. So, do you still seek out fare that's less bummer-centric, or has that disposition kind of changed with time?
I'm up for anything these days.
You also started to get into the ending of the film before Sean directed you away from it, so we weren't like spoiling things or whatever. But did you feel like you remembered the ending of the film pretty clearly?
I remembered the ending of the film clearly. What I didn't remember was how poorly green screened it was.
Or amazingly green screened.
I did not feel the heat off of that burning plane on either one of them.
Off of that projected image?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there was any... You could tell they were working with a budget on this one.
Yeah. Did you know they actually killed the old couple?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I know they killed 3 of her fingers.
They were actually married, too.
Oh, wow.
Them being married part is true. Obviously, they didn't kill.
Yeah. That's...
I think we'd hear about it a lot more if they had killed him.
Her fingers aren't married anymore to that hand.
They seem like people that had been actual ex-stars or something like that, where they're working actors. They didn't seem like they were just some day player type people.
No, yeah. I mean, McIntyre is kind of the old guy who is the original owner of Hooch and Turner and Hooch.
Oh, yeah.
But also is the sheriff in Psycho, and was the voice of Rufus in The Rescuers, which is something burned into my mind.
Yeah, that's how everyone recognized it was it's a Rescuers guy.
And Richard Franklin directed Psycho 2, right?
And FX 2.
Oh, wow.
All the best sequels.
Yeah.
His wife with the missing fingers.
She was in The Big Heat.
Is the voice of the widow Tweed in Fox and the Hound. So definitely, these two were... Oh, and she's also in The Rescuers, pulling in some animated money from the late 70s, early 80s.
This always felt like a Disney movie. I think this was in the Disney not the section, but there's a kids section that was mostly Disney movies at the local video store, and I remember this being in the clamshell with all that stuff. It probably, I guess it's not Disney, but I always kind of associated it with Disney.
Sure, yeah. Oh, she was also Lady Macbeth in the Orson Welles Macbeth.
Oh.
Well, she had a good run.
She did.
It wasn't a lot of stuff.
So we closed by asking what your expectations were for your return to Cloak and Dagger, and you said...
I definitely, it's talked about a lot more now, that whole kinder trauma, the 80s were darker for kids movies. So I'm really interested to look at it with those eyes now, because that was just a lot of movies back then, and I'm that's kind of what I'm most excited to see about how fucked up and dark it gets while maintaining the kids movie aspect of it.
It's fucking nuts how much it happens.
Yeah, it's wild, and I don't know. I mean, I don't follow kids stuff enough to know now, but from what I can tell, it doesn't happen anymore.
No.
There's no bridges like that.
So, kinder trauma. As you noted a little bit later than this clip, this movie was actively marketed towards kids and families.
Yeah.
And by actively marketed towards them, it looks like it was literally released to serve as 1984 Summer Olympics counter-programming for kids who couldn't care less for the games.
Yeah.
How did this seemingly contrasting relationship between the heavy dark content and the film's intended audience play to you now, so far removed from when this sort of thing is prevalent?
Well, I love it because it's such an anomaly, It's something you haven't seen in years and years. And I mean, again, it's hard for me to really critique this without taking my nostalgia glasses are so thick on this one because I watched this movie
Bill
so
Forsythe
many times.
Thick?
Bill, yeah, they're Bill Forsythe. I just hope they don't get broken. I'm shot from the head and behind.
I mean, that bullet went through the brain into the monitor. I think.
Yeah, it did.
Not a lot of blood matter on that screen.
Not a lot of blood. They cleaned it down. They wiped it down. That's how.
Were you scared at any point?
Oh, I don't think I was scared, but him killing the guy was just as intense as I remembered it, because I thought maybe I was putting some sauce on how intense that scene was. No, it was just as I remembered it.
And I think you probably have a better understanding of how dirty the San Antonio River is now.
Yeah.
That's an ignominious place to end up if you are shot.
Yeah. And not Rice, but the other assassin guy, the guy with the big block mustache. Mm-hmm. I remember being kind of scared of him when I was a kid. I remember he had very scary uncle energy, or your dad's friend energy.
Haverman, he was a former linebacker.
Yeah, he looked it.
Oh, weird. He's Rick Rossovich's brother.
Very weird.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. So, did Cloak and Dagger meet out any senior trauma on this pass?
No, I kind of feel like I could take those guys.
Okay, right on. So, moving on to picking up the scraps. Is there anything that we've missed that anyone wants to talk about?
I mean, I just think there's some real funny stuff I think with Coleman that we really haven't talked about.
Mhm.
Like, this is weird that we're like this far into this thing and we really haven't espoused Dabney Coleman, because like he's kind of the saving grace of this.
Yeah.
Again, I'm pretty critical of kid actors. They can fucking sink a movie. Like Henry Thomas, like he comports himself well. I think that he's at a disadvantage not having a really competent director who knows how to deal with kids.
Sure.
He's got a shitty actress for
a scene partner in a lot of these scenes.
And if she wants to come at us, fucking bring it. But I don't care that you're 6. But I mean, Coleman just drives this. There's not one scene where I feel like he's phoning it in.
Yeah.
Like he's still a big deal at this juncture.
Yeah, this is only a few years after On Golden Pond.
9 to 5.
9 to 5 is right around here.
Yeah, I think it's
82, I think.
Mm-hmm. But like, if for 1 second he kind of doesn't buy into this fucking plot and into this movie, like it's gonna sink so fast.
And he did that in spite of not really getting along with Richard Franklin. There's an AV Club interview from like 2012 where he's pretty just off the cuff shooting the shit about whatever and didn't really like Richard Franklin. He held back what he wanted to say.
Yeah.
But he did think that Henry Thomas was great.
Yeah. And again, like many instances where like kind of a lead and a director don't get along and yet the performance somehow still works. But like him, him telling to like, oh, you got to kill him first, I guess, like they're coming to kill me. Well, I guess you got to kill him first.
Yeah.
Or like sitting there with a goddamn cigarette and an espresso as like blank face, sweaty face Henry Thomas running up to him. And just like the coolest fucking guy, like at a table having an espresso with a cigarette and just nonchalantly telling a 11-year-old, well, you got to take these guys out, I guess.
Yeah. He really committed to Jack Black, and I like that a lot. And it is crazy that Davy's imagination is so harsh with him. Davy's imagination is really bloodthirsty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
cold.
Like, if this guy is in Henry Thomas's head, then Henry Thomas wants somebody pressuring him into violence.
Yes.
And to getting 6 people at least killed.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're at least 6. I mean, who knows, like, who got maybe clipped in the crossfire, and like who fell off that boat when there was a fire alarm. How many people hit the brakes and went through the windshield when he ran across the street?
Yeah.
He's really bad at driving, by the way.
Yeah, he's awful
He's
driver.
a harbinger of death.
I remember thinking as a kid that I could probably drive a car better than that.
Yeah.
I would have figured it out.
Oh, I did it, like, in the opening credits, you see that the music's by Brian May, but it's a totally different Brian May.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I
was like, oh, shit, Brian May.
Yeah.
It's not.
It's an
Australian guy.
Brian May.
Dabney Coleman really brought some of the 80s dad energy that my dad had in the 80s pretty well. So I think that there's a piece of me liking this now.
Dabney Coleman brought so much of that energy that I think of him as dads in movies that he's not in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would have lost, $20 betting that he was the dad in Neverending Story. And then only recently when I went back and watched that, I was like, oh, it's the guy, it's Gerald McRaney.
Gerald McRaney.
Yeah. But I was like, oh, that in my head, that was Dabney Coleman because of that, like, mustachioed.
Well, and you're probably mixing them from, like, Deadwood and Boardwalk Empire. The old iterations of McRaney and Coleman?
No, I think that this is a kid memory that just never got corrected.
Okay.
Which is why I was like really shocked to be like, oh shit, yeah, Dabney Coleman is not in that. I probably like used him as a linchpin in the Kevin Bacon game unfairly.
And no one was like bold enough to call you out.
Yeah, I was like, well, okay. I'm trying to think else who the fuck else was in Neverending Story. Jesus. Can anybody? Oh no, it's not even.
Kid?
The kid was from Cocoon, so we just talked about him.
Okay,
the kid was in
Barrett.
Daryl was another.
I want to say his name's Barrett, but that's probably not right.
Yeah, I think it's Barrett something.
Okay, well, yeah, maybe I was using that kid to connect, but Dabney Coleman, man, what a
R.I.P.
I mean, R.I.P. Certainly.
Again, Austin Zone. We talked about it last week, but for people who didn't listen, he grew up in Austin, went to UT. Zach Scott, who the theater in Austin's named after, was the one who's kind of responsible for steering him into acting.
You really do your project a huge service by casting him. Especially in this era.
He seems like a guy that wouldn't like my dad, that wouldn't have the emasculating role of an actor. Like, Dabney Coleman seems like a guy who would think that acting is kind of a pussy thing and never get into it. Just like Gerald McCraney, that they both have that energy where it's surprising they're actors because they are more likely to be carpenters or something.
Sure. So, major gripes. Starting with Mike, what was your biggest gripe with the film watching it now?
Biggest gripe, I would say, just the awful blue screen at the end. Some of the action scenes were a little like clunky, but that blue screen at the end was really, really bad. Even the fire leading up to the just anything with the fire at the end was just really, really bad.
Sean?
Yeah, again, I'll hit her again when she's down. The fucking little girl, Kim, I think is really a detriment to the whole movie, especially given how much she's in this.
She's in
how
a lot.
pivotal of a role she plays. Like, we could have had her get, like, she misses the bus or something that he takes downtown, and then it's just kind of Henry Thomas that takes the movie from there. Also, you brought up Brian May. I think he does actually a really, really terrible job. The score, never really goes away. Mike, when you said that this, kind of felt like a Disney movie, in terms of, music throughout the duration of the movie, yeah, very much like a Disney movie. There's even a scene when, Kim is reunited with her mom at the airport, and we dip into this really maudlin violin.
Yeah.
I think that this score is really, really obnoxious. It never really dissipates, and the audio mix of this movie is really off. There are scenes that are just really quiet, and you have to turn your volume up to hear what's being said, especially with Bill Forsyth and plot stuff. And then we have cars screeching and gunshots, and yeah, it's the audio mix is really shitty. That's a very minor gripe compared to how bad this girl is.
Yeah.
Because I am a big Henry Thomas fan. I think he's, I can't think of a bad performance he's turned in. I just think he's a little hamstrung here by the powers that be.
Mm-hmm. For me, I think it's just when Rice has him cornered and then he shoots at fucking
nothing.
His imaginary friend. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
If we are to establish, or if we're meant to believe that somehow Henry Thomas is being in danger here has rendered his imaginary friend real for even a moment, that needs to be fucking pretty clearly elucidated here on screen.
Yeah, Josh, I think you're right. I think what you could have done is that Flack goes over, snaps a twig or gives Henry Thomas enough of a window to pull that trigger so that the gun's not on him anymore, that he's able to pull that trigger. And then we're kind of left in that kind of cool ambiguity of holy shit, maybe it's not just his imagination. There's something spectral about Jack Flack. Maybe he exists kind of in the world as this entity. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the way that they do it, it's
or his mom's dead. I don't know, whatever. I think there are ways to make that work, but the way it happened didn't at all.
Yeah, it's not on one side or the other.
Or Jack Flack, in doing that, in pulling focus, Jack Flack actually can die in that scene. Mm-hmm. And so he has sacrificed himself for Henry Thomas to take that shot. But he just kind of gets up and bitches about his hat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then starts bleeding out through the bullet holes.
Sure.
So, how would we fix this movie for today for a modern audience? Starting again with Mike. If you don't have anything, we can come back to you. But
Mike has no notes. That's perfect, right, Mike?
I don't know, other than you have to set it in the 80s because this is all taken care of with a cell phone real quick.
Yeah.
All this stuff. I don't know. I would lean more into the Kinder drama, actually. I would have him staring.
That's where I would go to.
After he gets shot and falls into the river, he just sinks to the bottom, I guess. I wanted a shot of him staring at a floating body and grappling with what he's just done a little bit more.
Yeah. And I'd like the body to be face up.
Yeah.
So we're seeing his fucking dead eyes.
Yeah, let's have some like river crabs crawl out of his mouth too, just to fully damn Henry Thomas. Okay, so I mean, this is a fix, but it's also a gripe. But like, Jack Flack being his dad never really made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he didn't really idolize his dad. It didn't feel like that, certainly. It didn't feel like we had a lot of, like, you know, it was I hate you at one point early in the movie. It wasn't like his dad was his hero who, like...
But his dad does end up getting to be the hero, and I think we're meant to see that, like, that is sort of latent within his father. Okay,
but, like... And also just a weird side note, like, I don't know what kid has a wedding photo of their parents in their bedroom at this age. That was a little fucking weird. But what if they're not the same guy, right? What if Dabney Coleman gets to do the Jack Flack stuff, but we have...
Gerald McCraney be his dad?
Gerald McCraney. We have another, like, good, strong 80s actor playing his dad. That's really why that transition at the end would work. If we have, like, him thinking it's Flack coming, he thinking it's Flack coming, he thinking it's Flack coming, and then it's his dad. Mm-hmm. If that's a different actor, you know, I think that really sells it, that his dad now is his hero. Mm. There's just a confusing aspect to that whole thing, because you did not establish that he idolizes and loves his dad early in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree with that. I could see, like, I'm trying to think of who would be the right guy to play Jack Flack.
Glenn Powell, obviously.
Bill Murray.
Yeah, Glenn Powell, for sure.
You could have Bill Murray.
Yeah. Bill Murray would be
pre-Ghostbusters, probably.
Yeah.
I don't know how paternal.
Well, we had it right with Gerald McCraney. Why are we walking away from that perfection?
Green light Gerald.
Yeah,
and we're talking Simon and Simon era Gerald McCraney.
Yeah, and Josh, he was Simon.
Yeah,
he was Simon.
Okay, so Saving Graces. What was your favorite moment or element of the film? Starting with again our guest.
I'm again kinder trauma.
Nice.
I love me kinder trauma. Want it more in my life. It's
so delightful.
Yeah.
Like as a non-child to see all of this like terrible shit happen to children. I love it so much.
Yeah.
I mean, if Chunk had killed the Fratellis in the Goonies, like then we have a very similar situation to where we are here, right? Like that's something that's very different, right? Like bad guys fucking die in this.
Yeah.
And the Fratellis,
there are stakes.
Fratellis are going off to jail again, right? But like, if Chunk or Data, like if his slick shoes actually like lead to the deaths of like Jake and
or just innocent people.
Yeah. Maybe that's
because innocent people die because of Davey in this.
Well, we know which ones talked about still today a lot more between those two movies. My saving grace, of course, is Dabney. I mean, you don't have a movie with another actor there. You know, loved him in Tootsie, loved him in 9 to 5, loved him in everything I've seen him in. And I think that this is a really difficult watch without him.
Yeah.
Also, I do like that gate agent totally got shot in the dick by by the old guy. They're like, oh, my leg. But like, they only had to put that line in later after they're like, oh, wow, it really looks like he got shot in the dick.
Was supposed to be an ADR line?
Yeah, we're going to have to add that.
When they were like, we're not going to make PG-13, or we're not going to, this is still pre-PG-13.
Pre-PG-13, yeah. But like, you don't see the person who says, oh, he got shot in the leg. You don't see that. It's wild.
Yeah.
It's a wild line. So I definitely think he got shot in the balls. And and hats off to a movie with the courage to blow 2 old people up on a plane.
Yeah.
I just love that bodies fucking drop.
Yeah.
In this movie. Like to me, that's my favorite part of it is just, no, motherfuckers die in this.
Yeah. And like, there came very close to a couple times of like Henry Thomas's stunt person dying. Even on that weird, like, tuck and roll away from the airplane wheels.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit, that presumably small woman almost got run over there. That small woman in a red coat almost got fucking squashed.
Moving to the final things here, final bits of business. So, Mike, we asked you if you thought you were going to like Cloak and Dagger after all this time, and you weren't sure because of the undercurrent of sadness, which had kind of kept it from being a long-term mainstay movie in your youth. How do you feel about it now after all these years?
Love it. I think it's
Nice.
great.
Nice. So before we say goodbye to the listeners at home, where can listeners find you, Mike?
I'm at RS Mike Wiebe on Instagram and just at Mike Wiebe on Twitter, formerly known as X. Or the other way around.
I think we all still call it Twitter.
Yeah.
And this will probably come out in the fall.
Okay.
You may have a record coming out late this year.
Yeah, I'm not sure when, but if it's in the fall, I'm doing the Gainesville, Florida Fest. It's called Fest, and the Gamblers are there, and I'm doing stand-up there.
And that's Riverboat Gamblers for
Riverboat Gamblers, yeah, sorry. Riverboat Gamblers are performing there, and that's...
But Dracula's would be your band that has the record coming out.
Yeah, Dracula's have a record coming out sometime soon, and yeah.
And I mean, you're in the studio for the first time in a long time for
with Gamblers,
proper album with the Gamblers.
Yeah, totally. So slowly putting that together. So hopefully next year, next year.
My final side note was that I wrote down on the sister a nickname because of the ET being in my head. I wrote more like Drew act some more. And that's why I'm not doing stand-up anymore.
So I can use that?
Well, thanks, Mike. It was a fun dip back into the 80s for me. Reaffirm my Dabney love.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
And yeah, you if we have any advice to you, it's to kill him first.
Yeah, I will. That's what taught me. This movie taught me that.
Good.
It's how you live your life, you know?
Yeah. Hey, man.
Yeah.
Mike, you got to take these guys out.
Yeah. Got to take these guys out.
Well, thank you, Mike, for joining us.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for having me. This is fun. Anytime.
Awesome.
You've just listened to another installment of the Unkind Rewind podcast, mining and potentially ruining your childhood for content, one film at a time. Unkind Rewind is a Munchcast production and can be ingested wherever you listen to podcasts and on the Unkind Rewind YouTube channel. Music for this and every other episode of Unkind Rewind was composed by Divorcio Suave. Rate, review, like, and subscribe to Unkind Rewind on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and Good Pods. Links to all our social media accounts are in our show notes, but you'll find us as at Unkind Rewind Pod on nearly every social media platform, all of which are available at our website, unkindrewind.com. If you have a question, concern, complaint, or feedback, you can email the podcast at unkindrewindpod@gmail.com or call into our call-in line, area code 507-479-6440, and leave a message that can be played on air. Fans should join the Munchcast Discord to discuss this or any other episode of the Unkind Rewind with like-minded people. This dialogue may just make it into a future episode of the pod. The Unkind Rewind Patreon will be coming soon, so start squirreling that pocket change away. Thank you for listening to another Unkind Rewind.